When a 14-year-old boy walked into a biker diner holding his little sister's hand and asked strangers to watch her while he went to do something hard, no one expected what came next. What he was about to face across that street would change both their lives forever. This is Isaiah and Lila's story. The bell above the door chimed just after 8, cutting through the low rumble of morning conversation at Rust Creek Diner. Isaiah stepped inside, his hand wrapped tight around Lila's smaller one. His button-up shirt, pale blue, wrinkled, 3 sizes too big, hung off his narrow shoulders like he'd borrowed it from someone who no longer existed. Lila's glitter sandals clicked against the worn linoleum, her backpack patched with duct tape in 2 places. The breakfast crowd looked up. The usual crowd filled the booths, bikers with weathered faces and truckers nursing their second cups. Everyone moving at the slow pace of early morning. Robin, the cook with tattooed forearms and silver-streaked hair, stood behind the counter flipping hash browns on the griddle. Isaiah scanned the room and walked straight to the biggest booth by the window, the one that faced the courthouse across the street. 6 leather-clad riders sat there, coffee mugs scattered between plates of eggs and bacon. "Excuse me," Isaiah said. His voice cracked slightly. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Can someone watch her for a bit? I have to go do something hard." Conversation stopped. A fork clinked against a plate. Ted, a barrel-chested man with a gray beard and kind eyes, leaned back in his seat. "Hard like what, son?" Isaiah's jaw tightened. He nodded toward the tall brick building across the street, its columns stark against the morning sky. "I have to testify today." He looked down at Lila, whose face was partially hidden behind his arm. "But she gets scared when I'm gone." Robin set down her spatula and walked around the counter. "Testify? How old are you?" 14. Isaiah's grip on Lila's hand tightened. "She's 6. A woman named Danielle, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, wiped her hands on her apron and crouched down to Lila's level. "Hey there, sweetheart. What's your name?" Lila peeked out. "Lila," she whispered. "That's a beautiful name." Danielle had seen plenty of scared kids walk through these doors over the years. But something about the way Lila gripped her brother's hand, like he was the only solid thing in a tilting world, made her chest ache. "You hungry, Lila?" The little girl nodded. Stitch, a quiet man with wire-rimmed glasses and scars on his knuckles, shifted in his seat. "Where are your folks, kid?" Isaiah's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. "Our mom died when I was 10. Grandma took us in, but she's in the hospital now. Late-stage cancer." He paused. "We've been staying at the motel on 5th Street. The church is paying for it." "What about your caseworker?" Robin asked. "She called out sick this morning." Isaiah's voice was flat, rehearsed. "The hearing's at 8:30. It won't wait." Ted exchanged a glance with the man beside him, Marcus, whose leather vest bore patches from a dozen states. "Who were you supposed to go with?" "Our temporary guardian." "But she's not coming." Isaiah looked at each of them in turn. "I remembered this place. Last winter, someone here gave us hot chocolate when we were waiting for the bus in the cold. I figured—" He stopped, swallowed. "I figured maybe you'd be okay." The silence that followed felt heavy. Robin straightened up. "You walked your sister here because you trust us more than the system?" Isaiah nodded once. Danielle stood and gestured to the booth. "Lila, honey, why don't you sit right here with Ted? He makes the best napkin animals you've ever seen." Ted blinked, then recovered. "That's right. You ever seen a napkin rose?" Lila shook her head, her eyes wide. "Well then, we've got work to do." Ted pulled out a paper napkin and began folding. Isaiah knelt down in front of his sister. "Lila, I need you to stay here and be brave, okay? I'll be right across the street. You can see the building from the window." He pointed. "I won't be long. But what if nothing bad is going to happen?" Isaiah's voice softened in a way that suggested he'd said this many times before. These people are going to keep you safe. And I'll come back. I promise. Lila's bottom lip trembled, but she nodded. Isaiah stood, his face tight with the effort of not breaking. Thank you, he said to the table. Then he turned and walked out the door, his too big shirt catching the wind as he crossed the street toward the courthouse. Silence blanketed the room, like when strangers realize they're standing at the edge of something that matters. Then Stitch got up and walked to the counter. Robin, you got coloring sheets back there? I'll check. Danielle slid into the booth next to Lila. So, Miss Lila, how do you feel about pancakes shaped like teddy bears? Lila looked up at her, uncertain but hopeful. Really? Really? Danielle winked. Extra syrup? Lila smiled. A small, cautious thing that hadn't been there before. Across the street, through the tall windows of the courthouse, Isaiah disappeared into the building. The bikers watched him go, coffee cooling in their mugs, a strange weight settling over the table. Ted finished the napkin rose and handed it to Lila. There you go, darlin'. Pretty as you are. She held it carefully like it might fall apart. Marcus leaned over to Ted and muttered, That kid just walked into hell. Ted didn't look away from Lila. Yeah, but he walked out first to make sure she'd be okay. And so they waited, a table full of strangers who'd just become something else entirely. Inside the courthouse, Isaiah sat in a wooden chair that made him feel like a child playing dress-up. The room smelled of floor polish and old paper. His stepfather, Douglas Brennan, sat 20 feet away at the defense table, jaw clenched, eyes forward. Isaiah could feel the weight of that stare even when it wasn't directed at him. The prosecutor, a woman named Angela Reeves with sharp eyes and a gentle voice, approached the witness stand. Isaiah, I know this is difficult. Take your time. He nodded. His hands were shaking, so he pressed them flat against his thighs. Can you tell the court about the night of March 14th? Isaiah's throat went dry. March 14th. Lila's birthday. The night Douglas came home angry about something at work and found Lila's birthday cake on the kitchen counter. The night Isaiah learned that standing between his stepfather and his sister meant wearing long sleeves for 2 weeks. He was drunk, Isaiah began, his voice barely reaching across the courtroom. The words tasted like rust in his mouth, years of silence finally breaking apart. Lila had left her toys in the hallway. He tripped, started yelling. And then, Isaiah closed his eyes. He grabbed her arm, hard. She was crying. He stopped, forcing the words out. I told him to stop, and he turned around. Back at the diner, the clock above the counter ticked past 9:30. Lila had finished her teddy bear pancakes and was now working on her third napkin creation with Ted. This time, a swan. My brother makes paper airplanes, Lila said quietly, folding a corner with careful precision. Does he now? Ted's voice was soft. Really good ones. They fly all the way across our motel room. She paused, her small fingers stilling. Do you think he's okay over there? Stitch, who'd been sitting across from them reading a motorcycle magazine, looked up. Your brother's tougher than he looks, kid. He'll be fine. But Stitch didn't sound convinced, and Lila noticed. Danielle emerged from the kitchen with a tray of crayons and fresh paper. How about we draw something for Isaiah? So when he comes back, he has a surprise. Lila's face brightened slightly. Okay. Robin leaned against the counter, watching them. She caught Ted's eye and jerked her head toward the back. Ted nodded and slid out of the booth, letting Marcus take his place beside Lila. In the kitchen, Robin kept her voice low. You see how that little girl flinches every time someone moves too fast? Ted's jaw tightened. Yeah. And the boy, that shirt he's wearing, it's not his. It's too big, too formal. He's trying to look older, responsible. Robin crossed her arms. He's been doing this alone for a while. What do you think he's testifying about? Robin didn't answer right away. She'd seen enough in her 53 years to recognize the signs. Nothing a 14-year-old should have to talk about in a courtroom. Mid-morning, a customer, a middle-aged man in a suit, walked in and glanced at the booth where Lila sat surrounded by bikers. He raised an eyebrow at Robin. Since when did this place become a daycare? Robin's expression went cold. Since a kid asked for help and we said yes. You want coffee or are you here to run your mouth? The man held up his hands. Just asking. Then stop asking. Robin poured him coffee without another word. Inside the courtroom, the prosecutor guided Isaiah through 2 years of locked doors, hidden bruises, and nights when he'd sleep in front of Lila's bedroom door because it was the only way to keep her safe. Why didn't you tell anyone? Angela asked. Isaiah stared at his hands. Because every time we got moved, it got worse. Foster homes, temporary guardians, they didn't care. At least with Douglas, I knew what to expect. I could handle it. His voice cracked. As long as Lila was okay. But she wasn't okay, was she? Isaiah shook his head, tears sliding down his cheeks now. No, she wasn't. By noon, Lila had drawn 6 pictures, all of them featuring a tall stick figure holding hands with a smaller one. Marcus had taught her a hand-clapping game. Stitch had let her wear his reading glasses, which made her giggle because everything looked funny and big. But the mood at the table had shifted. The bikers were restless, checking the clock, glancing toward the courthouse windows. It's been almost 4 hours, Danielle muttered to Ted. I know. What if they don't let him come back? What if they take him straight to a shelter? Ted didn't have an answer. Nearly 4 hours later, the bell above the door chimed. Isaiah walked in, court papers clutched in one hand, his face pale and drained. His shirt was untucked now, his eyes red-rimmed. Lila jumped from the booth and ran to him. Isaiah! He caught her, wrapping both arms around her and pressing his face into her hair. For a long moment, he just held on. When he finally looked up, the entire diner was watching him. Danielle approached slowly. You okay, hon? Isaiah nodded, though it was a lie. He held up the papers in his hand. They're placing us in a foster shelter tonight. Temporary. Until they figure out what's next. Tonight. Robin's voice was sharp. They're separating you? Different wings. Boys and girls. Isaiah's voice was hollow. It's just until they find something permanent. Ted stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. No. Everyone turned. I'm sorry. Isaiah blinked. Ted looked at Robin, then at Danielle, then back at Isaiah. I said no. That's not happening. Not tonight. Marcus nodded slowly. He's right. Danielle pulled out her phone. I'm calling Linda at CPS. We're not letting these kids go to some shelter where they'll be split up after what he just went through. Isaiah stared at them, uncomprehending. You don't have to. Yeah, Robin said, wiping her hands on her apron. We do. And just like that, the plan began. Danielle's phone call stretched on. Nearly 20 minutes of pacing and negotiating on the cracked sidewalk. Isaiah sat at the booth with Lila curled against his side, her head on his shoulder. He hadn't eaten, just stared at the courthouse across the street like he was still trapped inside it. Ted set a plate of fries in front of him. You need to eat something, son. I'm not hungry. Eat anyway. Ted's voice was firm but not unkind. You'll feel worse if you don't. Isaiah picked up a single fry, held it for a moment, then set it back down. Why are you doing this? Ted had asked himself the same question 20 years ago when someone pulled him out of a burning situation he thought he deserved. The answer hadn't made sense then either. Because you asked. And because nobody should go through what you just went through and then get sent somewhere they don't know. He paused. You did real good in there, kid. He didn't feel good. Part of him still carried the twisted guilt of a kid who'd been taught to protect the man who hurt them, because that was the closest thing to structure they'd had when everything else fell apart. Danielle pushed back through the door, her face flushed. Okay, I talked to Linda Morrison at Child Protective Services. She remembers me from when I was going through my own mess years back. She sat down next to Isaiah. Here's the deal. She can authorize emergency overnight placement in a supervised setting while they process the case. What does that mean? Isaiah asked. It means you two can stay in the guest room behind the kitchen tonight. Both of you. Together. Danielle glanced at Robin, who nodded. Linda's sending over a social worker to do a quick assessment, and if everything checks out, you're approved until Monday morning when the case manager can meet with you properly. Isaiah stared at her. You're serious? Dead serious. Danielle reached across the table and squeezed his hand. You're not going to some shelter tonight. Lila lifted her head. We get to stay here? If you want to, Robin said from behind the counter. We've got beds, clean sheets, and Stitch here used to be a paramedic, so we've got medical covered if needed. She gestured toward the quiet man with glasses. Marcus and Ted already volunteered to take shifts outside your door, just to make sure you feel safe. Isaiah's throat tightened. I don't understand. You don't even know us. Marcus leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Kid, I've been riding with this crew for 8 years. You know what we do? We show up. That's it. Someone needs help, we show up. You showed up for your sister today. Now we're showing up for you. The social worker arrived mid-afternoon. Her name was Keisha, a woman in her 30s with tired eyes and a kind smile. She walked through the back room, checked the locks on the windows, inspected the beds, and asked Isaiah and Lila a series of questions while Danielle hovered nearby. And you feel safe here? Keisha asked Lila. Lila nodded, gripping Isaiah's hand. They made me teddy bear pancakes. Keisha smiled. That's a good sign. She turned to Isaiah. What about you? Isaiah hesitated. Yeah, I do. Keisha filled out paperwork on a clipboard, signed 3 forms, and handed copies to Danielle. You're approved through Sunday night. After that, we'll need to reassess. But for now, this works. She looked at Isaiah. You did something incredibly brave today. Don't forget that. After she left, Isaiah and Lila stood in the small guest room staring at 2 twin beds with quilted blankets and pillows that smelled like lavender detergent. There was a dresser, a lamp, and a window that looked out onto the alley behind the diner. It's nice, Lila whispered. Isaiah nodded, but he couldn't speak. He'd lived in houses before, real ones, with his mom singing in the kitchen and grandma's lavender lotion on the hallway table. But those places felt like memories borrowed from another life. After their mom died, Grandma had held everything together as long as she could, but when her health broke, the system sent them bouncing between spare bedrooms and unfamiliar couches. Sometimes that meant nights at Douglas's place because he was technically still listed on old paperwork, even though he'd stopped being safe years ago. Isaiah had learned to survive those stretches, to shield Lila as best he could, but none of it had felt like family. Not in the way this small room and the people waiting outside its door somehow did. That night, after Robin closed the diner at 9 p.m., Danielle brought them turkey sandwiches and apple slices. Isaiah managed 3 bites before his stomach rebelled. Lila ate half her sandwich and then climbed into bed, clutching the napkin Swan Ted had made her. Isaiah? She called out in the dark. Yeah. Are we going to be okay? It was the question she'd asked him 100 times over the past 2 years. And every time he'd lied. Told her yes. Told her everything would work out. But tonight, sitting on the edge of a bed in a room behind a biker diner, with 2 men he barely knew standing guard outside the door, Isaiah didn't have the energy to lie. I don't know, Li. I really don't know. The door creaked open. Danielle stepped inside, carrying 2 mugs. Warm milk and honey. My grandma's recipe. Helps you sleep. She sat on the edge of Lila's bed and handed her a mug. Then she gave the other to Isaiah. I had a daughter once, Danielle said quietly. Long time ago. I was young, broke, struggling with things I didn't know how to fix. The state took her from me when she was 4. She stared at the floor. I spent 10 years fighting to get her back. By the time I did, she didn't know who I was anymore. Isaiah looked up. Where is she now? Living her own life. We talk sometimes. It's not perfect, but it's something. Danielle met his eyes. I'm telling you this because I know what it's like to feel like the system chewed you up. But I also know what it's like to find people who don't give up on you. Why are you helping us? Isaiah's voice cracked. Because someone should have helped me. Danielle stood and ruffled Lila's hair gently. You two aren't going anywhere unless it's somewhere safe. That's a promise. After she left, Lila whispered, I like her. Yeah, Isaiah said. Me too. Outside the door, Stitch and Marcus sat in folding chairs, a deck of cards between them and a thermos of coffee on the floor. Neither of them spoke much. They didn't need to. They were just there, present, solid. Inside the room, Isaiah finally closed his eyes. He fell asleep knowing someone was standing guard. Not because they had to, because they chose to. 3 months later, Isaiah sat in the same booth by the window, a stack of GED practice books spread in front of him. His handwriting filled the margins of a math worksheet, equations he'd taught himself between morning dishwashing shifts. The too big button-up shirt was gone, replaced by a plain gray hoodie that actually fit. His hair was longer now, brushing his collar. Across the table, Lila colored in a library book about butterflies, her tongue poking out in concentration. Her glitter sandals had been replaced with sneakers, white with purple laces that Danielle had let her pick out herself. The patched backpack still sat beside her, but now it was full of books Stitch brought her every Tuesday from the library downtown. Isaiah, what's metamorphosis? Lila asked, squinting at a word. It's when something changes into something completely different, like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. Oh, she went back to coloring. That's cool. Robin set down 2 plates, grilled cheese for Lila, a burger for Isaiah. Eat before it gets cold. Thanks, Robin. Isaiah took a bite, chewing slowly. 3 months ago, he couldn't eat. Now his body remembered how. The diner had become their rhythm. Isaiah woke at 6 a.m., helped prep the kitchen, studied until noon, then picked up Lila from the community center where she spent her days doing arts and crafts with other kids her age. Evenings were homework, dinner at the big table with whichever bikers happened to be around, and then bedtime in the guest room that had stopped feeling temporary. But nothing was permanent yet. Danielle's fostering application was still crawling through the system. An endless parade of paperwork, visits from social workers with clipboards, and phone calls that always seemed to promise soon. The caseworker called it processing. Isaiah called it waiting. Ted slid into the booth across from him. How's the algebra coming? Slow, but I'm getting it. Isaiah tapped his pencil against the page. Test is next week. You'll pass. You're smarter than you give yourself credit for. Ted pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. Got something for you. Vocational training program starts in January. Auto mechanics. They take students your age, and it counts toward your diploma. Isaiah stared at the paper. Seriously. Dead serious. Marcus knows the guy who runs it. Already put in a good word for you. For a moment, Isaiah didn't speak. Then, quietly, thank you. Stop thanking us, Ted said. But his voice was warm. You're family now. This is what family does. The word settled between them, family. Isaiah had spent so long believing family was something that hurt you, controlled you, broke you down. Maybe family wasn't just the people you were born to, or the ones who tried their best until life took away their strength. Maybe it was also this. People who showed up without being asked, who stood in the doorway when the nightmares got loud, who made sure his sister laughed more days than she cried. The bell above the door chimed. A man in jeans and a faded jacket walked in, older, gray-haired, with the posture of someone who'd spent years carrying weight. He scanned the room and headed for the counter. Robin glanced up. Help you. Coffee, black, and whatever's good today. Everything's good today. Robin poured the coffee. You new around here? Not exactly. Used to work across the street. He nodded toward the courthouse. Just retired last month. Judge Martin Kress. Isaiah's head snapped up. He knew that name. That was the judge from his hearing. Robin's expression shifted. Well then, coffee's on the house. Judge Kress raised an eyebrow. Appreciated, but not necessary. Take it anyway. Robin set the mug in front of him. You did right by some people we care about. The judge looked around the diner again, and his gaze landed on Isaiah. Recognition flickered across his face, but he didn't say anything, just gave a small nod before turning back to his coffee. Later, as Isaiah washed dishes in the back, Danielle came into the kitchen holding her phone, her face unreadable. Isaiah. He turned off the water. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. She took a breath. The approval came through. Official foster placement, both of you. You're staying. Isaiah's hands were still wet, soap bubbles sliding down his wrists. He stared at Danielle, his brain struggling to translate the words into something real, permanent and safe. You're staying, Danielle said, her voice breaking slightly. Both of you, together. This is home now. The dish towel slipped from his fingers. For real. For real. Isaiah didn't cry often, hadn't let himself. But standing in that kitchen, with the smell of French fries and coffee in the air and Danielle looking at him like he mattered, the walls came down. Danielle pulled him into a hug. You're okay, kid. You're both okay. That night, after Lila had gone to sleep clutching her napkin swan, Isaiah stood at the window of their room, looking out at the alley. Stitch was out there, sitting on a crate, scrolling through his phone. Not because he had to be, just because. Isaiah opened the window. Hey! Stitch looked up. Yeah. You don't have to keep doing this. The guard shifts. We're official now. Stitch smiled faintly. I know, but some habits are worth keeping. Isaiah nodded. He understood. This wasn't about paperwork or legal obligations. This was about showing up. About being the kind of person someone could count on. 3 months ago, Isaiah had walked into a courthouse to face the man who'd hurt him. He'd walked in terrified, alone, carrying the weight of his sister's future on his 14-year-old shoulders. But he hadn't walked out alone. The courage he'd shown that day didn't just protect Lila. It opened a door he didn't know existed, one that led to a place where people kept their promises, where safety wasn't conditional, where love didn't come with bruises. Isaiah closed the window and climbed into bed. Across the room, Lila slept peacefully, her breathing steady and soft. He understood something he hadn't felt in years, what it meant for a place to stay safe even when the people he loved were gone. Isaiah walked into that diner as a scared kid trying to protect his sister. He walked out knowing that sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is ask for help. What would you have done in his place? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to embrace the journey for more stories of courage, hope, and the families we choose. See you in our next video.